Your grandmother's attic might be worth more than you think. I'm not talking about selling the house or cashing out investments. I'm talking about the everyday things that filled American homes in the 1960s and 70s. A ceramic vase, an old cookbook, maybe a tin full of buttons. While the rest of the world moved on to disposable everything, these handmade, well-crafted items quietly became rare. And rare means valuable. Today we're looking at 25 things your grandmother probably owned that collectors are paying serious money for right now. You might want to check your basement after this. Pyrex bowls and bakeware. Every grandmother I knew had Pyrex. The mixing bowls came in sets, nested inside each other, usually in primary colors or those turquoise and pink patterns. The casserole dishes had those distinctive patterns. Butterprint with the turquoise roosters. Gooseberry with the berries and leaves. Amish butterprint with the black and white designs. Corning stopped making patterned Pyrex in the 1980s. They switched to clear glass because it was cheaper to produce. That decision created scarcity. Suddenly those bowls that sold for $3.99 at Woolworths weren't being made anymore. Collectors started hunting for complete sets, and prices climbed. A complete set of butterprint mixing bowls, all 4 sizes in excellent condition, sells for $400 to $800. The pink gooseberry pattern brings similar money. Rare patterns like Lucky in Love, the one with the 4-leaf clovers, can reach $1,200 for a full set. Even single large casserole dishes in desirable patterns sell for $60 to $150. The condition issues are specific. Dishwasher damage fades the patterns, which cuts value in half. Scratches inside from metal utensils lower the price. But the biggest problem is chips on the rim. One small chip can drop a $200 piece to $50. Still, check your grandmother's kitchen cabinets. Those bowls she used every Thanksgiving might fund a nice vacation. Complete china sets. There was always one cabinet in Grandma's dining room that we weren't allowed to touch. The china cabinet. Those plates only came out twice a year, maybe 3 times if someone important visited. The rest of the time they sat behind glass, perfectly stacked, collecting the kind of dust that only forms on things nobody uses. Most families had china from one of the big names. Lenox was popular for weddings. Noritake showed up at a lot of anniversary dinners. Royal Doulton if your grandparents had a little extra money. The designs were traditional, florals mostly, with gold trim that you had to hand wash or it would fade. Nobody thought much about their value back then. They were just the good dishes. Things changed when people stopped registering for china. Younger couples wanted cash or experiences instead of plates they'd never use. Suddenly, there were fewer buyers and a whole lot of complete sets sitting in estate sales. But collectors noticed. A full service of 12, all matching, no chips. That's hard to find now. Lenox Autumn pattern from the 1950s regularly sells for $2,000 to $3,000. Royal Doulton's Bunnykins children's sets, if complete, can reach $800. Even Noritake's more common patterns fetch $400 to $600 for a full set. The key is condition and completeness. 8 place settings minimum. Original serving pieces. No cracks in the glaze. If your grandmother kept hers wrapped in felt and only used it 10 times in 50 years, you're looking at the high end of these values. Check the back stamp on the bottom. Older pieces have different markings, and those details matter to serious buyers. Depression glass. Your grandmother might have had colorful glass dishes that didn't match the china. Pink, green, amber, or clear glass with decorative patterns. This is depression glass, made in the 1920s and 30s as promotional giveaways or sold cheaply in stores. Common patterns like Cameo, American Sweetheart, and Mayfair are collectible. A complete set of 30 or 40 pieces in good condition sells for $300 to $800. Individual pieces like serving platters or butter dishes bring $30 to $100. Rare colors like cobalt blue or red command premiums. A red depression glass piece might sell for $100 to $400. The challenge of depression glass is that reproductions exist. New glass made in old patterns. The way to tell is usually by color and quality. Original depression glass has a certain color tone that reproductions don't match. The patterns are crisper on originals. Air bubbles and uneven seams are normal on original pieces. Signs of the mass production methods used. Look in kitchen cabinets and china hutches. Depression glass was everyday dishware for many families. It wasn't precious or carefully stored. If your grandmother used it regularly and it survived, that's what makes it valuable now. Complete sets are hard to find because pieces broke over decades of use. Gold jewelry from the 1970s. The 1970s had a specific jewelry aesthetic. Big, bold, gold, chunky link bracelets, oversized hoop earrings, medallion pendants on heavy chains. The metalwork was substantial, often 14K or 18K gold, weighing more than modern pieces. Fashion changed. Jewelry got smaller and more delicate in the 1990s and 2000s. But gold is gold, and the melt value alone makes these pieces worth selling. A thick gold chain from the 70s might weigh 2 ounces. At current gold prices, that's $4,000 in metal value before you consider any design or maker premiums. Designer pieces command even more. Cartier's Love Bracelet, introduced in 1969, now sells for $7,000 to $12,000, depending on condition. David Webb's animal bracelets from the 70s fetch $15,000 to $30,000. Even in signed pieces, if they're heavy 18K gold with good design, sell for well above melt value. Cameo brooches, the ones carved from shell or stone, are particularly valuable. Victorian-era cameos in good condition bring $500 to $2,000. The carving quality matters. Look for fine detail in the face and hair. The deeper the carving, generally the more valuable the piece. Your grandmother probably kept jewelry in a wooden box or a velvet-lined case. That's where you want to look. Designer handbags from the 1960s, 70s. Your grandmother's closet might contain handbags she stopped using decades ago. Leather gets better with age if it's been stored properly. Designer bags from the 60s and 70s are particularly collectible now. A Hermès Birkin or Kelly bag from the 1970s sells for $10,000 to $40,000, depending on size and leather type. Chanel flat bags from the same era bring $5,000 to $12,000. Gucci's Jackie bag, popular in the 70s, sells for $2,000 to $6,000. Even Coach bags from the 1970s, when the company made small batches of high-quality leather goods, fetched $200 to $800. Authentication is important because counterfeits exist. Look for serial numbers, quality stitching, and maker's marks. Authentic designer bags have even stitching, quality hardware, and solid construction. The leather should feel substantial and smell like leather, not plastic or chemicals. Condition matters, but vintage bags are expected to show wear. A few scratches or a worn corner doesn't ruin value. Missing hardware or torn leather does. Original dust bags and boxes add value. But even without accessories, a genuine vintage designer bag in decent condition is worth investigating. Wristwatches and pocket watches. Grandfather kept his watch in his pocket on a chain. Grandmother wore a small watch with a delicate band. These weren't smart watches tracking steps. They were mechanical devices, tiny gears, and springs keeping time without batteries. Vintage watches are serious collectibles now. A Rolex Submariner from the 1970s, one of the models with a smaller case and acrylic crystal, sells for $15,000 to $25,000. An Omega Speedmaster from the same era brings $8,000 to $12,000. Even lesser-known brands like Longines or Hamilton, if the watch is in good working condition, fetch $500 to $2,000. Pocket watches have their own market. An Elgin or Waltham pocket watch from the early 1900s, especially if it's gold-filled or solid gold, sells for $300 to $1,500. Railroad-grade pocket watches, the ones railroad workers use because they met strict accuracy standards, bring even more. Condition is everything. A watch that doesn't run is worth maybe 20% of a working example. Original boxes and papers multiply value. A Rolex with its original box and papers might be worth double what the same watch without documentation would bring. Check drawers and jewelry boxes. These small items are easy to overlook, but potentially very valuable. Lincoln pennies from 1970. Most people don't look at pennies. They're change. You use them at the gas station or throw them in a jar. But in 1970, the U.S. Mint made a mistake that turned some pennies into valuable collectibles. Two different dies were used that year. One created a large date, the numbers bold and thick. The other created a small date, thinner and more delicate. The small date pennies are rare. Collectors estimate only about 50 exist in pristine condition. That scarcity drives value. A 1970 S small date penny in perfect, uncirculated condition sold at auction for $38,000. Even circulated examples in good condition bring $3,000 to $8,000. The catch is identifying them. You need to compare your penny to known examples because the difference is subtle. The 7 in the date is the clearest indicator. On small date pennies, it's noticeably thinner. Your grandmother might have kept coins in a jar or drawer. Old people often save pennies in coffee cans or ceramic containers. Go through them. You're looking for 1970 S pennies, the ones minted in San Francisco. Check the date carefully. This is one of those situations where 5 minutes of searching could be worth thousands. Error stamps and commemoratives. Grandma probably had a stamp collection, or at least some old letters with stamps still attached. Most stamps aren't valuable. The ones printed by the millions and used for everyday mail, they're worth face value or maybe a few cents to collectors. But errors and limited printings, those are different. The 1918 inverted Jenny, a stamp where the airplane was printed upside down, is famous. Original examples sell for over $1 million. Your grandmother probably didn't have one of those, but there were other errors. The 1979 CIA invert, where the letters were printed upside down, sells for $5,000 to $15,000. Certain commemorative stamps from the 1960s and 70s, if they're in mint condition and part of a rare printing, can be worth $50 to $500. Block sets, where 4 stamps are still connected, are worth more than individual stamps. Check any old albums. Look for stamps that are still attached to the backing paper, never used. Those are mint condition. Check for printing errors, unusual colors, or stamps that seem slightly different from normal examples. A magnifying glass helps. Most won't be valuable, but finding one rare stamp pays for the time spent looking. Vintage perfume bottles. Grandma kept perfume on her dresser in bottles that looked like tiny sculptures. Cut crystal. Frosted glass. Some had atomizer bulbs you squeezed to spray. Others had decorative stoppers that looked like flowers or geometric shapes. The perfume inside usually evaporated decades ago, but the bottles remain. French manufacturers like Lalique and Baccarat created bottles that were works of art independent of what was inside. A Lalique Deux Fleurs bottle from the 1920s can sell for $1,500 even when empty. Baccarat made bottles for Guerlain that now trade for $800 to $2,000 depending on the design. Even American bottles from companies like DeVille Bisque, which made atomizers in the 1930s and 40s, sell for $100 to $400. The Art Deco period produced especially valuable pieces. Look for geometric patterns, bold colors, and heavy glass. Bottles from the 1960s and 70s tend to be less valuable unless they're from high-end designers. But a complete vanity set, matching bottle, powder jar, and tray, that's a different story. A full set in good condition can bring $600 to $1,500. Condition matters more than you'd think. Chips on the stopper reduce value by half. A broken atomizer bulb, if it's not replaceable, can make the piece nearly worthless. But find an intact bottle from a known maker and you found something worth selling. Buttons and sewing supplies. There was always a tin of buttons. Usually a cookie tin or a round container with a decorative lid. Inside, hundreds of buttons in every size and color, collected over decades whenever a shirt wore out or a coat was discarded. Some buttons are collectible. Bakelite buttons from the 1930s and 40s sell, for $5 to $50 each depending on size and design. Car bone buttons bring $10 to $30. Glass buttons with unusual designs or colors fetch $5 to $20. It doesn't sound like much, but a tin with 200 buttons might contain 20 or 30 valuable ones. The complete sewing kit has value too. Vintage Singer sewing machines and decorative cabinets sell for $200 to $600. Old wooden spools of thread, the kind with paper labels, are collectible. A set of vintage thimbles in their original case brings $30 to $100. Look for unusual materials and good condition. Bakelite can be tested by running it under hot water. If it smells like formaldehyde, it's likely bakelite. Glass buttons should have metal shanks, not plastic. Sorting through buttons takes time, but it costs nothing and might produce surprising results. First Edition books. Grandma's bookshelf held family Bibles, old novels, and maybe some cookbooks with stained pages. Most old books aren't valuable, but first editions of important works, especially if they're signed or in good condition, can bring serious money. A first edition of To Kill a Mockingbird in its dust jacket sells for $5,000 to $15,000. The Great Gatsby brings even more, $100,000 and up for pristine copies. Your grandmother probably didn't have those, but she might have had first editions of books that became classics later. Cookbooks have their own collecting community. Julia Child's Mastering the Art of French Cooking, first edition from 1961, sells for $1,000 to $3,000. Betty Crocker's early cookbooks bring $50 to $200. Community cookbooks, the spiral-bound ones churches and social groups made, are collectible if they're old enough. Pre-1950 community cookbooks sell for $20 to $100. Check the copyright page. A first edition usually says first edition or first printing. Later printings have numbers like second printing or 10th printing. Dust jackets are crucial. A first edition without its dust jacket might be worth $100. The same book with a jacket could be worth $5,000. Handle old books carefully and check what you have before donating them. Military memorabilia. If your grandfather served in World War II, Korea, or Vietnam, there might be military items in the house. Uniforms, medals, insignia, helmets, letters from the service. These aren't just family heirlooms. They're historical artifacts that collectors pay substantial money for. A complete World War II Army uniform in good condition sells for $500 to $1,500. Helmets bring $200 to $800 depending on type and condition. Medals and ribbons, especially rare decorations like the Bronze Star or Silver Star, sell for $300 to $2,000. Even everyday items like canteens, mess kits, and entrenching tools have value to collectors. Provenance matters. Items that can be traced to a specific soldier, especially if there's documentation or photographs, are worth more. A medal in a case with a soldier's name engraved brings double what an anonymous medal would. Letters and diaries from soldiers are particularly valuable. They provide historical context that researchers and museums want. Handle these items with respect. They represent someone's service. But also understand they have financial value if your family chooses to sell them. Military collectors are active and willing to pay fair prices for authentic items in good condition. Louis Vuitton trunks and vintage luggage. The old trunk in the attic was probably covered in dust and stickers from places your grandparents visited. Steamer trunks from the early 1900s were built to last, made of wood and covered in leather or canvas with brass hardware. An authentic Louis Vuitton trunk from the early 1900s sells for $5,000 to $20,000, depending on size and condition. The classic monogram pattern is most valuable. Smaller pieces like hat boxes or train cases bring $2,000 to $8,000. Goyer trunks are similarly valuable. Even trunks from lesser-known makers have value if they're in good condition. A well-made steamer trunk with original brass hardware and leather strap sells for $300 to $800. Many people buy old trunks to use as coffee tables or decorative storage, so there's a strong market. The key is checking for maker's marks. Louis Vuitton trunks are stamped inside. Authentic pieces have serial numbers. The canvas pattern should be consistent and well-aligned. Hardware should be solid brass, not brass-plated steel. Condition affects price, but even worn trunks have value for their history and craftsmanship. Tube radios and old cameras. The kitchen radio sat on the counter, playing news and music all day. It was big, heavy, made of wood or bakelite, with knobs you turn to change stations. When it stopped working, someone probably put it in the basement or garage instead of throwing it away. Those old tube radios are collectible now. A 1940s Philco Cathedral radio in working condition sells for $300 to $800. Zenith transoceanic portable radios bring $200 to $600. Even broken radios have value for parts. Vintage vacuum tubes sell for $5 to $50 each, and restores buy non-working radios to cannibalize for parts. Old cameras are another category. Leica rangefinder cameras from the 1950s and 60s sell for $1,000 to $5,000. Hasselblad medium format cameras bring similar money. Even simpler cameras like Polaroid SX, 70 folding cameras, or Kodak Brownies have collector value at $50 to $200. The most valuable electronic item from that era is the Apple I computer. Only about 200 were made in 1976. About 70 are known to still exist. One sold at auction in 2014 for $905,000. Your grandmother almost certainly didn't have one, but it illustrates how vintage electronics can appreciate dramatically if they're rare and historically important. Check that old equipment before scrapping it. Classic vinyl records. Grandma's record collection sat in the living room cabinet or basement, mostly big band music. Maybe some early rock and roll, perhaps classical albums. Those records seemed obsolete when CDs arrived. But vinyl made a comeback. First pressings of important albums command premium prices. The Beatles' Yesterday and Today, with the rare butcher cover, sells for $10,000 to $25,000 in mint condition. Bob Dylan's first album, if it's a stereo first pressing in excellent condition, brings $5,000 to $8,000. Elvis Presley's Son Records releases sell for $2,000 to $10,000. More common albums still have value if they're in good condition. A complete collection of Beatles albums in near mint condition might be worth $2,000 to $4,000. Led Zeppelin first pressings bring $100 to $500 per album. Even albums that aren't rare can sell for $10 to $30 if they're clean and playable. Condition is crucial. Records should be free of scratches, warps, and excessive wear. The album cover matters as much as the record. A mint album in a torn cover is worth half what would be in a clean cover. Check the label. First pressings have specific label designs and matrix numbers that collectors look for. Vintage pianos and violins. The upright piano in the living room was probably more furniture than instrument by the time you remember it. Maybe someone played it years ago, but mostly it held family photos and collected dust. Still, pianos from good makers hold value. A Steinway upright piano from the early 1900s sells for $3,000 to $8,000 in good condition. Baldwin pianos bring $1,500 to $4,000. Even mass-market brands like Kimball or Story and Clark fetch $500 to $1,500 if they're well-maintained. The catch is that moving a piano costs $300 to $800, so that factors into sale value. Violins are different. A genuine Stradivarius or Guarneri is worth millions, but your grandmother almost certainly didn't have one of those. What she might have had is a quality German or French violin from the 1800s. These can sell for $2,000 to $10,000 if they're in playable condition. Mass-produced violins from the early 1900s, the kind labeled Stradivarius copy or conservatory model, sell for $200 to $800. They're not rare, but musicians need affordable instruments, and a 100-year-old violin that sounds good is buyer appeal. Check cases and closets. String instruments were common in homes before television. Mid-century modern furniture. Grandma's furniture was probably traditional. dark wood, formal lines. But if she bought anything in the 1950s through early 1970s, she might have owned mid-century modern pieces without knowing they'd become valuable. An Eames lounge chair, the one with the leather cushions and molded plywood frame, originally sold for about $400 in 1956. Today, an authentic vintage example in good condition sells for $6,000 to $10,000. Herman Miller, the manufacturer, still makes them, but collectors want the vintage pieces. The wood has aged. The leather has patina. It tells a story. Other makers created valuable furniture too. Knoll produced designs by Florence Knoll and Eero Saarinen. An original Saarinen tulip table from the 1960s brings $2,000 to $4,000. Lane Furniture made those low coffee tables with the dovetailed edges. A good example sells for $400 to $800. Check furniture for maker's marks. They're usually underneath or on the back. A small metal tag or a stamp in the wood. Herman Miller, Knoll Haywood Wakefield. These names add value. Also check the construction. Dovetailed joints, solid wood, heavy weight. These indicate quality that collectors want. That old coffee table or bookshelf might be worth considerably more than you think. Early IKEA Furniture. This one surprises people. IKEA, the cheap furniture store where you buy bookshelves for $50, made some pieces in the 1970s and 80s that are now valuable. Limited production runs, discontinued designs, and the company's evolution from Swedish manufacturer to global giant created collectability. Certain pieces, particularly those by designer Gillis Lundgren or early space-saving designs, sell for $1,000 to $5,000. A clam chair from 1974 recently sold for $3,500. An original Critter children's table and chairs from 1972 brought $800. These aren't rare antiques. They're mass-produced items that happen to have good design and limited availability. The challenge is identifying valuable pieces. Most IKEA furniture from that era isn't worth much. You need specific models from specific years. Check for labels or stamps indicating the model name and year. Research online before hauling that old IKEA piece to the dump. It might be worth more than the new one you're replacing it with. Tiffany-Style Lamps. A distinctive lamp probably sat on grandma's side table or piano. Stained glass shade with floral or geometric patterns. Heavy brass base. These lamps were popular in the early 1900s and again in the 1960s and 70s. Authentic Tiffany Studios lamps, made between 1895 and 1930, are extremely valuable. A genuine Tiffany Dragonfly lamp sold at auction for $2.8 million in 2021. Even smaller authentic Tiffany lamps bring $50,000 to $200,000. The catch is authentication. Real Tiffany lamps are stamped on the base, usually Tiffany Studios, New York. Most lamps that look like Tiffany are reproductions. But even quality reproductions from the 1960s and 70s have value now. A well-made stained glass lamp in good condition sells for $300 to $1,000. Brands like Handel and Duffner and Kimberly, companies that competed with Tiffany, made lamps that now sell for $2,000 to $20,000. Crystal chandeliers are valuable too. Baccarat chandeliers from the early 1900s bring $3,000 to $15,000. Even simpler crystal chandeliers with good design sell for $500 to $2,000. The key is checking for makers' marks and assessing quality. Heavy glass, intricate metalwork, and good condition indicate value. Art Nouveau Mirrors. Grandma had mirrors throughout the house. One large one in the front hall. A hand mirror on the dresser, maybe a standing mirror in the bedroom. The frames are where the value lies. Art Nouveau mirrors from 1890 to 1910 feature flowing, organic designs, floral motifs, curved lines, nature themes. High-quality examples with sterling silver frames or bronze frames sell for $800 to $4,000. Mirrors by known designers like Gustav Gershner or Maurice Bouval bring $2,000 to $15,000. Victorian mirrors with elaborate carved wood frames are also valuable. A large overmantel mirror with gilded frame sells for $1,000 to $5,000. Smaller hand mirrors with mother of pearl or tortoiseshell handles bring $100 to $500. The mirror glass itself can be aged and spotted. That's acceptable and even desirable. It proves age. But cracks in the glass reduce value. Check the back of mirrors for maker's marks or labels. Feel the weight. Quality mirrors have substantial frames and heavy glass. The style matters too. Art Nouveau and Art Deco pieces are most valuable. Victorian mirrors are sought after. Simple mirrors from the 1960s and 70s, unless they're by known designers, typically have little value. Bisque Porcelain Dolls. Dolls sat on shelves or in glass cabinets in many grandmothers' homes. Some were childhood toys kept for sentimental reasons. Others were collectibles purchased specifically to display. The valuable ones are usually older, from the late 1800s through the 1940s. German Bisque dolls from makers like Armand Marseille Kessner or Simon and Halbig sell for $300 to $3,000, depending on size and condition. French dolls by Jameau or Bru bring even more, $1,000 to $10,000. These dolls have bisque, unglazed porcelain, heads, glass eyes, and human hair wigs. Condition is critical. Cracks in the bisque reduce value by 80% or more. Original clothing add value. A doll in her original outfit might be worth double what a redressed doll would bring. Working features like sleep eyes that close when you lay the doll down, or crying mechanisms add value. American composition dolls from the 1930s and 40s, like those made by F&B or Ideal, are less valuable but still collectible. A composition Shirley Temple doll, in good condition, sells for $200 to $800. Later dolls, like Madame Alexander dolls from the 1950s and 60s, bring $50 to $300. Check attics and closets. Dolls were often stored away when children outgrew them. Shag carpets and area rugs. The shag carpet in Grandma's living room was bright orange, harvest gold, or avocado green. Deep pile, soft underfoot, impossible to vacuum properly. These carpets define 1970s interior design, for better or worse. Original shag carpets in good condition, especially in bold colors and interesting shapes, sell for $500 to $1,500. Round shag rugs, conversation pick carpets, and wall-to-wall installations that have been preserved somehow. These have collector value. Interior designers buy them for retro-themed spaces. The catch is condition. Shag carpet that's been walked on for 50 years usually shows it. Matting, stains, odors, these kill value. But a carpet that was in a spare room, rarely used, or stored away might be pristine. Clean, fluffy, vibrant color. That's what buyers want. Check basements and attics. Sometimes people removed and stored these carpets when they remodeled. A rolled-up shag rug in the back of a closet could be worth $800. It sounds absurd, but design trends are cyclical. What was tacky in 1995 is cool again in 2025. Art Pottery. The ceramic vase on Grandma's mantel might look simple. Brown or green glaze, handmade shape, maybe sign on the bottom. This is Art Pottery, made by American studios in the early 1900s as part of the arts and crafts movement. Rookwood pottery, made in Cincinnati from 1880 to 1967, is highly collectible. A large vase with a complex glaze can sell for $1,000 to $10,000. Gruby pottery, known for its matte green glaze, brings $800 to $8,000. Weller, Roseville, and Van Briggle pottery have similar values depending on piece and condition. Check the bottom for marks. Most art pottery is signed or stamped. The artist's initials add value. The glaze quality matters more than the form. A simple vase with an exceptional crystalline or flambe glaze is worth more than an elaborate form with ordinary glaze. Condition is important. Cracks, chips, or repairs reduce value significantly, but minor glaze imperfections from the original firing are acceptable. These are handmade items, and small flaws prove authenticity. Handle carefully when checking. Art pottery can be fragile, and damaging a $5,000 vase would be unfortunate. Folk art and outsider art. Grandma might have had simple art on the walls, a needlepoint picture she made herself, a painted wooden sign, a carved figure. These weren't valuable to her. They were just decorations. But folk art and outsider art have become serious collecting categories. Outsider art made by self-taught artists can be extremely valuable. Works by artists like Bill Traylor, Grandma Moses, or Purvis Young sell for $10,000 to $100,000. Your grandmother probably didn't have pieces by famous outsider artists. But unknown artists' work still has value if it's good. An interesting painting or sculpture might bring $200 to $2,000. Folk art includes quilts, covered earlier, whirligigs, weather vanes, trade signs, and handmade tools. A carved wooden weather vane from the 1800s sells for $1,000 to $10,000. Painted trade signs like an old barber pole or shop sign bring $500 to $5,000. Even simple items like painted game boards or handmade toys have collector value at $100 to $800. The appeal is authenticity. These items were made by people with no formal training, making things for practical purposes or personal enjoyment. That rawness and honesty appeals to collectors tired of mass-produced goods. Check basements and garages. Folk art often ended up in storage because it didn't fit formal decorating schemes. Hand-stitched quilts. The quilt on Grandma's bed wasn't just a blanket. It was hundreds of hours of work. Hand-cut fabric pieces stitched together in intricate patterns, then quilted with thousands of tiny stitches. Some quilts were made for specific occasions: weddings, births, anniversaries. Antique quilts, especially those made before 1900, can sell for $500 to $5,000, depending on pattern, condition, and quality. Complex patterns like Log Cabin, Lone Star, or Baltimore album quilts are most valuable. Quilts with historical significance or known provenance bring premiums. Condition is tricky with quilts. Somewhere is acceptable and even expected. The fabric and thread are 100 plus years old, but tears, stains, and fading reduce value. A quilt in excellent condition might be worth $3,000. The same quilt with significant staining might bring $500. Still, $500 for what looks like a worn blanket is worth considering. Check attics, cedar chests, and closets. Quilts were often stored carefully, wrapped in sheets or packed away. Look for even stitching and complex patterns. The more pieces in the quilt, generally the more valuable it is. A simple 9-patch quilt might be worth $100. A complex applique quilt could be worth $2,000. So, which of these 25 items brings back the strongest memory? Maybe it's a china that only appeared on holidays. Maybe it's the quilt you slept under as a child. Drop a comment about the item that means the most to you. Your grandmother's house holds more than nostalgia. It holds history, craftsmanship, and yes, potential money. These items survive because they were well made and someone cared enough to keep them. That combination of quality and sentiment is rare now. Everything's disposable. Nothing's built to last. These 25 items remind us when things were different. Before you go, check out our video, 20 everyday items from the 1970s you completely forgot existed. We dig into more vintage finds that'll take you right back to childhood. And if you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, hit the like button and subscribe. We're posting new content about forgotten treasures every week. See you in the next one.